Hello, everyone. First, let me say that we really appreciate you all being here. The Camera Image Festival managed to cram into 1 week some of the most fantastic film screenings and wonderful workshops and some of the best parties in our industry. I don't know if any of you have experienced that part of it. But we want to say thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you making time in your schedule for our presentation. My name is Seth Emmons. I'm the Director of Communications for Ernst Leitz Wetzler, better known as LEITZ Cine. Our company was created about 15 years ago to bring by the owner of Leica Camera, to bring Leica's almost 150 years of optical design history into the world of motion picture and television. And although our mission of creating lenses is still just in its teenage years, really, our colleagues at Leica Camera have been pushing the optical boundaries in photography for over 100 years. And they continue to be one of our best partners to this day. So I am honored to be joined on stage today by one of my favorite people at Leica Camera, and I don't just say that because he's sitting beside me. For nearly 30 years, he has helped design lenses for not just the iconic Leica M system, but also medium format photography to smartphone optics and everything in between. For nearly 20 years, he's been the head of Leica's optical design department, overseeing all the projects that they've been working on, and every time I sit down with him, I learn something that I didn't know before, including this morning when we were going through the presentation for maybe the 40th or 50th time. So I think you're all going to learn something as well. I'm very excited that we'll be able to share something exciting with you. Please, everyone, please join me in welcoming Peter Karbe. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, and thank you very much that you're coming here to this presentation. This is the first time for me to do a presentation in front of this audience. Normally I talk to photographers, not to cinematographers, but I hope we will find a way to go through my presentation. And sometimes it's a little dry. Sorry for that. Please don't go away and stay till the end, please.
Yeah. Can we all make a promise to be kind to Peter today?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the title for this presentation was done by Seth.
Yeah, so I'm responsible for the title, but the content comes from Peter. And before we dive into it, I want to just set a couple of ground rules really quick. Peter and I, although we have prepared a presentation, we view this more as a conversation. So throughout the presentation, I will be occasionally chiming in to offer views on different things or explain things in a little bit more detail. And I just want to let you know that Peter has authorized me to interrupt him. Yes. So we have made an agreement.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
But number two, we also give you permission to join the conversation as well. So we want, if you have questions during the presentation, please raise your hand. Our wonderful festival volunteers have some microphones that they'll be able to pass through the crowd. This is being streamed and recorded, so we want to try and make sure everyone can hear all the questions, not just in the room, but outside and later on. Given the setup of the room, if we can't get a microphone to the back, maybe I'll just have you yell it and I'll repeat it into the mic here. But yeah, and if we get into the weeds on something, it's part of our discussion. I may redirect us to the presentation, ask to revisit that afterwards, just so we can get through everything, so please don't take offense to that. So, without further ado, Peter, take it away.
Let's start, Seth, yes. Okay. The agenda is as follows. First, I would like to talk Leica's heritage. Then I would like to talk about technologies needed to get better performance in optics. The third one is about constraints from different perspectives. The fourth is about light flux, and this is a very dry but important issue. Sorry for that. And the fifth issue is lenses. Let's talk about lenses, of course. So before I start, please let go away these two elephants. The one says optics still matters. And the second says size matters. What does it mean? As bigger as better. So bigger sensor, bigger optics, mainly better system. So Leica's heritage. So Oskar Barnack was the inventor of the 35mm format camera at LEITZ. He had the idea to make snapshots, to do the Momentaufnahme in German, yes? And he thought, when I take a smaller sensor or a smaller film format, I can get a shorter focal length, and with a shorter focal length, I have a certain depth of focus wide open. And that was his idea, to realize a snapshot. And what the reason for that was, at that time, mostly large format cameras were used, and with large format cameras, you use long focal length lenses to cover the field of view. Long focal length lenses required stopping down to get a certain depth of focus. Stopping down means longer exposure time. Longer exposure time means very stiff photography. So 21, 22, 23, and the picture was done, yes. And so the advantage of the smaller format was that you can get, with the shorter focal length lenses, certain depth of focus, and with a wide open lens, and so the exposure time was small. So it was the idea behind. And in the Leica handbooks, the very first one, edition from 1930, you can read on page number 9, the biggest advantage of this system are the shorter focal length lenses with a larger depth of focus. And this idea will follow us through the whole presentation. Yeah. So what happens? When you have a large format, you need a certain focal length to cover a certain scenery, yes, an angle of view. And when you take a smaller format, you have a shorter focal length here, yes, to get from the same perspective, from the same point of view, the same scenery. That's all.
I want to add one thing real quick on that last slide. This was something that Peter taught me that optical designers think about. The left side is always the image, the subject you're capturing.
Yes.
The right side is always the film, the sensor, and the lens is always in the middle. So throughout this presentation, if you ever get lost about what's on what side, subject, capture medium.
So just to make it clear, for optical designers, the light is coming from the left side and going to the right. And that's a positive direction, and so everything is coming from the left side and going to the right.
There you go.
Yes, exactly. So I would like to highlight the design targets defined by Oskar Barnack and Max Berwick. Max Berwick was the first optical designer at LEITZ to design a 35mm format. And they took the format and the lens, and the system was done, yes. And they defined the optical design targets by taking a postcard, a printed postcard of a good picture, yes, of a good photo. And they counted the dots. How many dots do we need to get a real good picture printed as a postcard? And they came to the conclusion a postcard with 1 million dots is sufficient. Yes? And with this knowledge, they defined the circle of confusion needed on the image plane by 30 microns. Circle of confusion means the object points need to be imaged with a smaller size, smaller or equal than 30 microns, and it's sufficient. Why do I highlight this? I just want to say pixel counting is not new. They did it already. And the second is, the depth of focus tables we publish at on photo side is still based on the 30 microns. It should be renewed, of course, because we have today 3.6 micron pixel pitch, so it should be much smaller, yes. So the first generation of Leica lenses had a certain footprint. All lenses here you see, so on the axis you see the focal length, and here you see the f number, yes. And here are certain lens systems, and all these have the same footprint, 3 groups. 3 lenses in 3 groups, 4 lenses in 3 groups, 5 lenses in 3 groups, 6 lenses in 3 groups. The reason for that was that at that time, coating, anti-reflection coating was not available. To get better performance in an optics, more lens elements as better the performance. But you couldn't increase the lens elements without increasing ghost and flare, and so there was a limit, 6 air glass surfaces for a system to realize an optical system with a reasonable performance. Increase the lens element would cause ghost and flare and would damage the performance enhancement. Yes.
Basically, every optic or every group has two sides to it. So the front and the back side of it. And when they don't have anti-reflective coatings, the light starts to bounce off them. We think glass is clear, but I can see in a lot of you wearing glasses right here the reflection of the screen here. And so inside of a lens, that happens even more dramatically.
Okay, just by the way, I would like to highlight that Oscar Barnack was an amateur cinematographer. And before he started to design the 35mm camera, he took films, how is it called? Taking films, yes.
Made films, yeah.
Make films, yes.
Capture films.
And capture films. And he used the first Leicas or the first functional samples to evaluate the right exposure for the film. Yes. So this is about heritage. Now I would like to talk technologies. Advanced technologies needed to get an evolution in optics, to get better optics in terms of performance, size, or what you name it. Yes. And coating technology, of course, was very important at that time. The second was glass technology, optical glass technology. And the third was A-sphere technology I would like to talk about. And the fourth is inner focusing, rear focusing, floating elements. So how do we focus and what is implemented in focusing the system? So before I talk about glass material, I would like to highlight the light. Normally we talk about white light. And when white light is reflected by optics, by glass, it happens that the white light will be dispersed into its colors. You always see it in the rainbow, and when you see here the lower rainbow here is is caused by the reflection within a raindrop here. Here the light is coming in. On the rear side of the rainbow of the drop will be dispersed into its colors. But there is a second rainbow. Perhaps you didn't recognize it till now, but next time you will see it. And this is caused by a second reflection here. First reflection, second reflection, and then it goes out and it is dispersed. And when you look closely, you see here that the red one is outside and the blue one is inside. And here it's the opposite. It's reversed. Yes. And the reason for the lower is because of the second reflection, so the brightness is reduced remarkably. And we talk about light as a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's between 400 nanometer and 700 nanometer. And in Wikipedia you can see how dispersion happens on a prism. So, and there's a very nice presentation on Wikipedia where you see that the blue wavelength is reflected more than the red one here. Yes. So every time you use optics, glass material for optical refraction, color dispersion happens. So LEITZ did their own glasses. In between 1940 and 1980, LEITZ developed a lot of new glass materials for better optimization of optics. Not only LEITZ, but LEITZ did some pioneer work in that direction. So here you see the dispersion value, and here you see the refractive index of a glass material, and here are several glasses developed by LEITZ. Low dispersion glasses here to minimize the optical dispersion, the color aberration, and high refractive glasses here to minimize the bending of the lens elements, to optimize the aberration or to reduce the aberration. And here are some glasses which are needed with anomal dispersion to get apochromatic correction, so a very well corrected system.
So just to tag on that, so just to repeat it, because it goes kind of quick, the dispersion element is making sure that rainbow doesn't happen, because if that splitting of light lands on your sensor, your image is not sharp, it's not clear, it's not hitting at the same spots because the wavelengths are different. So when that happens, the optics then have to bring it back together by the end. And if you can make it happen less, the glass has to do less work. And for the refractive, it's the same thing. If the glass is kicking it off at a hard angle, you've got to use more glass to try to bring it back so it all comes together at the end. And solving these glass problems are a big part of making lenses smaller and have to do less work and be less complicated.
Okay, thank you. So most important first was, of course, coating technology, which reduced remarkably the reflection on each optical surface. I need to highlight that it was not LEITZ who invented coating surfaces. It was done by Zeiss in 1936 by Mr. Smakola. He invented the coating systems everybody is using, and it took a long time till we implemented coatings into our systems, because at the beginning the coatings were not very easy to handle. You couldn't touch the lens elements, and so it was not so easy to implement it for consumer products. We implemented it around 1950. But with this coating technology, we could reduce from 4% reflection at each surface, uncoated, to a single coating you have down to 2%, so you could double the surfaces. So instead of 3 groups, you could implement 6 groups and have the same result. And today we have multi-layer coatings where the reflection is down to 0.2% over a wide range. So it's today we don't have trouble with anti-reflection coating, I think. So it works very well.
Yeah,
but these two technologies, glass technology and coating technology, was necessary to get next steps into the optical design improvements, yes.
Yeah. And in cinematography now, with lens modifications, this is also relative to an uncoated element or a single coated element, which you'll see some companies doing either as a product or as a service for people. And you can see what that big of a difference means. It means if you do an uncoated element, you're taking away quite a big amount of the performance. A single coated has a little bit of less, and then obviously multi-coated is what everyone basically does in their products now. But to take that idea and uncoat multiple elements inside of a lens, all of a sudden you're taking your performance down dramatically, and you're introducing a lot of other artifacts, which you may want or you may not. But this is why that technology exists.
So as an optical designer, I want to reduce all aberrations as much as possible. Yes, of course. So let's come to the next technology, A-sphere technology. Normally we have spheres. So the lens element has 2 radii. On the one side, the red one, this is radius here, and the blue one here. So this is, with these 2 radii, the lens system is defined. The lens element is defined. An A-sphere has multiple radii on the surface, yes. And this helps to improve performance. I will show it later. But this production, aspherical lens production, is very complicated and requires a lot of processes added to the normal production of lens elements. Not only in producing the lens elements, but also in assembling the lens and so forth. What does the A-sphere do? So here we see a sphere, so the outer rays will be refracted more than the inner rays. That's normal. That is called spherical aberration. And then you have a blurred spot. Instead of a sharp point, you have a blurred spot indicated like here. Spot is very large. And when you now implement an A-sphere, you can reduce the refraction at the edge here for the outer rays here, and you can make a very fine spot, just as an example, yes. You can use different A-spheres differently, but this is the main target, to implement higher optimization without increasing the lens elements, because to increase the performance you need several requirements fulfill, and for each requirement you need 1 parameter for optimization. As more requirements you implement, as more lens elements you need. But we don't want to have so many lens elements, so implementing an A-sphere can help to reduce the lens elements by keeping the size and improving the performance. And this is the idea. LEITZ started to to implement A-spheres 1966, and today we are on a very high level regarding production and implementing A-spheres into optical systems. And when you look at the mobile phone optics, there's only one lens where no A-sphere is implemented, which is not an A-sphere, yes. So I think in the future looks like multi-A-sphere optics, I would say. Yeah.
And the ones in the smartphones are actually plastic molded A-spheres, which is not really a big part of cinematography at this time. All of those are glass A-spheres that are then shaped and polished a little bit more in a different process. But the technology continues to evolve. So in another 10 or 20 or 30 years, we may be talking about the next generation of A-sphere technology in that way.
Let's see when it will be. Okay, let's talk about focusing. When you do overall focusing, you move the whole. So this is, as an example, the Hugo 50mm T-stop 1.5, and this is the optical construction here. You see, and when you would use this lens system as total focusing, so from infinity to minimum object distance, you move the whole system away from the center to focus. But the optical system can be optimized for one distance only. Yes. When you change the focus, it will happen that the performance will change and spherical aberration, for example, and coma will appear. And to get rid of that, you can implement a floating element. So this means that the whole system is moving, but the rear group is moving slower than the rest, and so you change the distance between the two groups. And this can help. This is an additional degree of freedom, and so you can optimize the system for the whole focusing range to a certain extent. Yeah, so that's the idea behind floating element. So, okay.
Yep. Good.
Thank you. So we have to hurry a little bit, I think. So let's talk about constraints. Yes, size matters, optics matters, of course. What are we talking about? User conditions. You as a cinematographer define the field of view you want to cover. You define the point of view where you want to cover with this, and you define the F number or T-stop. You define the sensor format and the focus range. This is one condition. The second is the mechanical design or construction condition. Overall length, how long should it be? The front diameter, how big should it be? The camera interface, the user interface, the mechanical focus range, weight and durability, and so forth. I can't list everything, but just to give you an idea. And then we have some optical performance conditions for infinity and close focus. We talk about resolution, MTF. I come later to this issue. We talk about character or bokeh, new word, yes. Breathing with or without. Ghost and flare with or without, focusing range, movement, how much movement does the mechanical designer accept, and so forth. Aperture, size, and position. And of course, design for manufacture. In design, you can design everything. Performance is there on the paper, but it's a different thing to produce it. So it's not only designing, it's also producing it on a very high level, and this is also a condition we have to take care about in optical design. Yes. Otherwise, you have a very nice design on the paper, but when you get it out of the production, you fail. Yes, and this can be a bad issue. Yes, I would say. Okay, when we talk about user conditions, field of view and sensor size defines the focal length. And not the focal length is defined, and then you go that direction. You go from the field of view and the sensor size, and then the focal length of the lens is defined. Focal length of the lens and the F number defines the entrance pupil diameter. How big is it in the entrance pupil diameter? And the entrance pupil diameter and the field of view defines the light flux. And this is a very, very important issue for optical designers, and it's very important to know to evaluate the optical system.
And so as cinematographers, when you come to us as manufacturers, you're like, I want a T1.0 lens that can have this performance at this size and this weight. you've already defined something, and sometimes those are just physically impossible by physical and physics to accomplish. There are constraints to every design that put the optical designer into a small window of being able to work right off the bat.
So, and that's the reason why these lenses are different. Different lens with different approach behind. So, when we talk about optical systems, we need to know which sensor. The receiver need to be defined, and here we did an overview of several sensor sizes, and I want to reduce it to down to three. So talk about Alexa 65, the full frame or large format, and the Super 35. And when we talk about optical design, we always talk about the image circle. And this is not only this area, it's the whole circle, which is by diagonal of the system here. Yes. We always have rotational symmetric systems, and so you can say, in principle, the optics is designed and produced to have a circular image plane, yes. And when we take the first one as 100% and say the image circle area has a 2,800 square millimeters, so it's a whole, and the second one has 1,570, it's approximately half of the first one, and the third one has 900 square millimeter area, image circle area, and it's 1/3 of the first one. And if you compare optical design systems designed for that, please keep in mind that they are designed for different image circle areas. So again, what happens when you have different formats? You know it already, yes, the large format, you have the focal length of f1, and the short format, you have focal length f2, and f1 is much bigger than f2. Yes, because large format, yes, when you compare it. And when you have this, you use the same focal length for different formats, you reduce, of course, the angle of view here. Here you see it, yes. So the same, so you change the angle of view. So even though, and sometimes it's mixed up in some argumentations. We always have to keep in mind, what do I want to do? And you as a cinematographer, I think you always first define the point of view and the angle of view. And then you need to define which format do I need and which focal length do I need at that time. And not the other way around. So. And now I would like to talk about light flux. The F number, or the T-stop, defines the light which comes from object point will be transported by the lens to the image point. With this number, you know the exposure values you have to set up. That's okay. But to define an optical system or to evaluate an optical system, you need to know the whole light which is transported by the optics from object side to image side. And this is a light flux. This is the whole thing, yes? This is a pipeline. How much light is going through the optical system? And this is defined by this equation. You do not need to know it, just need to know on which figures define this value. So, and when I talk, what did you say this morning? The whole light is the geometrical volume.
Yes.
This morning we discussed how can we express it a little different.
This is one of those things I learned that I had no idea about. So if anybody else, if you have questions about it, please, you can ask. But we'll go through it a little bit.
So we can have a look at light flux in different ways. So from the front surface, from what is going in the system or what is going out. And if you don't want to lose too much light, you want that what is going in, you won't get out. Yes, right? And by both sides, you want to have the same. Yes. And how is it defined on the inside, on the object side? So you have an entrance pupil area here. Yes, and here is the angle of view. And with these two values, you can define the light flux quite easily. So Or you go to the opposite side, to the image side, then you define the image area and the aperture. Yes. Aperture is defined by the F number or T-stop. And between the optics is still a black box. But with these values, you define the effort we have to put into the optical system. And some refractive power in front of the aperture and behind the aperture is defined by that, by the user-defined constraints. Yes. So just to highlight what is the entrance pupil is the aperture you see from front when you look through the lens from the front side. And the exit pupil is what you see when you look from the back side. So here's a bayonet, look, you see the aperture from the back side. I stopped down a little bit so that you can see the iris, yes.
The entrance pupil is not the front element.
No.
It's not the diameter of the front element. It's when you look through that and you see the aperture, that size is what it's defined by. Same for the rear. The exit pupil is not the size of the rear element, it's what you see when you see the aperture through that rear of the lens.
So, so the angle of view we already discussed is defined by the half image diameter divided by the focal length. Yes, and the aperture is defined by the 1/2 f-stop. Yes. So, and the entrance pupil diameter, again, focal length divided by the f-stop. And the aperture is defined 1/2 f-stop. Yes, so it's all defined by the user constraint. And there's no way out for the optical designer. Yes.
Yeah.
There's no
you move one number and 3 other formulas have just changed and now need to be recalibrated so that what's coming in is the same as what's going out.
So, and G, you can evaluate on that side or on that side. So, and the larger G, the greater the optical effort for a certain performance, let's say, yes. So, and G changes by the change of the sensor format. Yeah? And the larger the sensor, the greater the optical effort. G changes by the change of the aperture. You know it already, yes? You do it always when you want a depth of focus or so. Yes? And G defines the 3D information in the image. Yes? The larger G, the shallower the depth of focus. And shallow depth of focus defines the information about 3D. So when mobile phone photography came up, I said, oh, okay, the world become a flat pizza. Yes, everything is sharp from front to end. The world is becoming a pizza again, yes. And so this is with a low G. So let's talk about breathing now in between. So here, this is an example how breathing appears. So this is a 50 millimeter lens, should cover the 50 millimeter lens, and this is the distance to the image plane. The whole image here, 50 millimeter for object infinity, and the exit pupil is here in this position. And when you want to focus, and the half field of view is given by phi1, and it's half angle of view at infinity. So, and when you focus, total focusing system, you move the lens away from the image side, and then you have phi2, because the distance increases by this value, yes, when you focus to 200 millimeters. And here you can see it again, yes. So infinity, close focus. And when we overlap it, you can see here that the angle changes by focusing. Yeah. And so phi1 is greater than phi2, and this is breathing in principle.
Yeah. Yes. It's basically changing the focal length performance of the lens. So that's why you have the field appear to change, because the lens is starting to behave field of view-wise like another focal length as it moves away.
So, and in this example, this is extreme because the exit pupil is quite close to the sensor. It would result in 24% changing the size. Yes, would be a lot. To get rid of this, you need a telecentric exit pupil position on image side. So here the entrance pupil is here within the focal point of the 50mm lens, and then all chief rays will be refracted that it enters the image plane at the rectangular angle here. Yes, rectangular. So now we have Phi1. Now we do focusing again, and it stays the same. Yes. And here you can see it again, and we let overlap. And here Phi1 and Phi2 are similar, so no breathing. This is a theory. In practice, mostly you can't realize telecentric in total for the optical system, because when you have a big sensor in a small mount and a small mount, the lens would become too big. So the trend is to go in that direction, telecentric, but not in total. Yes. If you have a small sensor with a big mount, you can realize it. But if you have if the sensor itself is near to the size of the mount, it doesn't work well. So, okay. Again, equal field of view, we explained, and now we have a look at the mobile phone in comparison. And I did a comparison with the M lens, M camera, M lens 75 f2, so 35mm format, and I compare it with the mobile phone optics we co-developed with Xiaomi. There is also a 75mm here, 75 equivalent focal length. So same f number, same field of view, but different sensor sizes. Yes. The sensor is very, very small, 1 by 2.8 inch, but even 50 megapixels. So the pixel pitch is 0.5 micron. It's around the wavelengths. Yeah. So and I took the same scenery, a picture of the same scenery. And before that, I would like to highlight the light flux here is 290 approximately, and here the light flux is 8. And as I said, as larger the light flux, as shallower the depth of focus. And here you can see it. It's quite clear, yes. Hope so.
The megapixel count on both of these is comparable. The phone is 50, the camera is
60, yeah.
So you're getting as much pixel information, but the depth of field is obviously very, very different.
Yeah. So another comparison of two different photographic lens systems. So here this is an older lens from Leica, 180mm tele lens with f2. Yes, for 35mm format, and this is a 28 f2, also for 35mm, but it's an M lens. Yes, and you see here the entrance pupil is quite big, 180 divided by 2, it's 90mm. That's what you see in the front, but the field of view is 13.7 degrees. So large entrance pupil, small field, and the other one. 28 divided by 2 is 14, but the field of view is big. So a small entrance pupil, but a large field of view. And both have the same G, the same light flux, because the same format, the same F number. And that's very important, I think. So let's come to the fifth. Oh, we are on track, yes?
Oh, too good.
I was afraid we wouldn't realize it, but let's see. Okay, let's talk about lenses. Before I talk about it, go more in detail, I would like to highlight one aspect. You always recognize it and judge it. It's a focusing behavior of a lens system. So here's your object plane where you want to focus, and now we are out of focus, and what the object plane is imaged as a blurred circle here, yes, circle of confusion. Then you focus, move the lens, and here you are in focus, and when you continue focusing, you are out of focus, yes, and you get a circle of confusion. Through focus behavior, I would like to talk with you. So here, this is the first defocus position. and then we go closer. This is the best image plane. And then we continue focusing and we get out of focus. And then the image looks like this, the images. So, and you can judge this as a through focus MTF by highlighting the contrast, which changes by focusing. As you see here, the contrast is maximum, yes, and then it's going down again. Here's a contrast and here's a defocus. Through focus behavior on MTF, based on MTF. MTF, I will explain now, yes. And what does it mean, MTF? Definition of image performance by MTF. To be honest, I don't like MTF as a single judgment of an optical system. It gives you a hint, an idea how the performance can be, but you need to see pictures, images, or projections or whatever. Yes, MTF gives you a hint if you trust the company you buy from the lenses or you rent the lenses, and that gives you nothing more. And here is an MTF chart we publish normally. And here you see the contrast, and here the image height. I explain it later a little bit more in detail. Yes, and here are different frequencies: 40, 20, 10, and 5 line pairs. And MTF means modulation transfer function, and MTF values as higher as better. Huh? That's, but it depends on your expectation. What would you like?
And we'll get into a lot more detail. So
yes.
If you haven't caught it all yet, there's more.
So MTF describes resolution by the frequencies and contrast by the modulation for the image. And here is an example. This is an older chart. I did it when we were in analog times, so I talk about negative and film, but it's still the same, yes. So one frequency means line pairs per millimeter. You have one black and white. 5 means 5 black and 5 white. When I talk about this structure, I don't talk about sharp edges. I talk about sinusoidal change of the black and white. If you talk about
how black is the black, how white is the white?
How white is the white? So it's sinusoidal change of the contrast here. Yes. So if you look at the edge, so you have all the frequencies included. So, and here are different frequencies: 20, 40, and 80, for example. And now we take out the 10 line pairs. And here you see 100% contrast, 80% contrast, 60% contrast, 40. So as lower the contrast, as more gray the white is, as more gray the black is. And at the end, 20%, you can see the structure of the frequencies, but it's very low in contrast. The contrast is defined by the bright minus dark, divided by bright plus dark. So, for example, 225 and minus 25 delivers 80% contrast. So, and here is a simulation. This is a simulation. This is a house, a building. It's in Wetzlar, where we are located. And these are the low frequencies. So the big parts. And medium frequencies, it's just a simulation, just to give you an idea what does it mean, higher frequencies. And more details in the image we are talking about. Yes.
And all of these exist in the image.
Yes.
It's not like it's one option, 4 different options. They're all in there together.
So the lower frequencies gives you the first impression of the image. Is it foggy or is it clear? Yes. That's in that direction. So, and when we talk about MTF, here the frequencies are in different colors. So 40 line pairs, 20, 10, and 5. And here's the contrast, and here's the image height from 0 to 21. This means from 0 to 21. Here the image center is here, belongs to this area here. And due to the fact that we are doing rotational symmetric systems, you can judge. So image height 3 is within this circle. So image height 3 is within this circle of image. and so forth.
The way you can think about these charts is that across the bottom is just how much of the image circle it's describing. Are you describing the center 20% of it, 50% of it? What's happening within those inner parts of it? And the y-axis is your contrast as we're talking now. So what this shows, what most lenses do, they start out in the center, very high contrast, and as you get toward the edges, that contrast starts to fall off. It's a very natural thing in optics, and it's a often desirable thing in cinematography to have loss of contrast toward the edges if you're trying to bring your image into the center. So this doesn't necessarily say a low-performing lens. It's a natural performance and one that people actually value in different applications.
So, and we always talk about tangential and sagittal MTF. So tangential means structures are on the circle, yes, in that direction, and sagittal is in that direction. So, and astigmatism is a pointless image, so on the one side it's always moving in that direction. So, just by the way, it's too complicated. So, and here is an image, an MTF, and here is for this image height is a simulation of, this is original, and this is the transformation by the lens. And here is a bad one. Yes. So again, look here. There you see the drop of the contrast. Another example, so took out here, again. It's still a simulation. It's not so easy to show different lenses in the same way, just to give you an idea what happens, yes. You go closer and you see, oh, it's not sharp enough, and that's resolution you are judging, yes. So let's talk about these lenses. Yes.
Yeah, so we're not going to do a lens presentation here, but I want to highlight these are the examples that we're going to use to show some of the characteristics that we've been talking about. And before we get into it, I just want to point out the different design targets that each of these lenses was designed for, because it will be relative to how they perform and what their purpose was. The Hugo lenses were designed originally optically to be Leica M lenses, so their design was for photography. It was for the full frame, what we call in cinema, full frame format, or 35 millimeter film. They were designed as photo lenses, so things like breathing weren't a primary design characteristic. The Sumoluxes were designed for Super 35 cinema format, so a smaller format, and their design target came from the last years of film before digital really took over, when the desire of cinematographers, the user conditions put on it were to be very sharp and very fast and very clear. In the film days, people weren't going back to the Baltars at that time. They were looking to make master primes that were smaller. Like that was the goal, was to make a small, fast, clear lens. The LC lenses were designed originally for cinematography for large format, and they weren't designed to be as fast, as sharp, as clear. They were designed to have a different characteristic, a different transfer of focus information, but to be for that format. So I only highlight those because we'll see how those represent as we go through.
So Hugo, you already know now. It's the M lens where we implemented floating element. So A-sphere is implemented, floating element is implemented, special glass materials implemented. And I didn't notice here, but of course we have coatings. There's multi-layer coatings implemented. So, and as you see here, it's a total focusing system with a floating element to minimize the variation of the close focus performance in comparison to the infinity.
Yeah, even photo lenses utilize those things to minimize what for them is more the field of view change. For us, we call it breathing because we're capturing through focus range. So photo lenses still have that, but you'll see how designs evolve and get more complicated when you try to actually eradicate it as much as possible.
So, and the drawing you see here, the green rays here corresponds to the center image. Yes, this is a ray bundle which leads to the center image point, and the red one corresponds to the image height 12 here, belongs to this circle. Yes, just for your understanding. Yes. Okay. And
sorry, go back real quick.
yes.
So take note, we'll look at it later, but take note of the angle of the red lines, the red image bundle, or light bundle, because that angle right there is the kind of difference between a more telecentric or a less telecentric lens, which is going to have other impacts. So we'll do direct comparisons later, but that's something to keep an eye on as we go through.
So when I talked about already about through focus MTF, and here's the through focus MTF behavior of this lens. And here you come here, from here, focus, here's a maximum focus, maximum contrast for 40 line pairs, for example, 65%, and then there is a fall off. And this characterization is very important for the optical designer to have a look at it, yes. And when you do a look at this image, this is a through focus MTF behavior you see here, yes. It's a different interpretation. This is an image. But in principle, it tells you how does a lens transfer defocus, intrafocal, in focus, and defocus, extrafocal. Yes, and so I like it very much. Sorry for that, but it's so creamy. Yes, so isn't it? Yes. Yeah. And it's a very compact lens, and still has a certain character, even though the highest contrast is at 65%. Yeah. But yeah, would you like to add something, or?
Well, let's go to the insert there. So here you see a couple of things. You see that point of perfect focus, which on that MTF chart is the top of that curve, and what is being represented visually here is what happens on the back side of that curve and on the front side of that curve, which you noticed are not symmetrical in all designs.
Yeah.
So the way the out of focus represents in front of focus and the way it represents in back is slightly different, but mostly consistent. And what you'll see here is how the structure of those metal pieces there starts to blur out and becomes less structured and softer. You know, when we see some other examples, it feels, when it's not as structured, it feels more impressionistic, but you're losing some of that structure in service of the image that's in focus. Oh, yes?
You may want to comment that you do see a trend in the extra and intra skewing to a color shift.
Oh, hold on.
I was just noting the shift to the color be in intra focus and extra focus. I don't know if you're going to talk about that on this image, but it's interesting. I can see it's more green at the far end.
Yes, there's a residual collaboration.
Yeah, so we did intend to mention that as well.
Sorry.
No, you're, hey. It's a good eye. So yeah, as you see near the top of the image, there, on the ridge around the lettering, there's a bit of a green shift to it, and on the near side of focus, there's a magenta shift. And this is what often is called color aberration. And it happens in a lot of lenses. In a photography lens, it's not as noticeable as it can be sometimes in a cinematography lens, but yes, it is part of the factor of lens design.
Okay, I took some pictures to see it in different scenery. So how does it defocus in front and the back focus, how does it look like? And I think it's a very sharp area here, and the outer focus goes, good, how can I say it?
The way it falls off is it gives you information. You don't lose all of the information, but it also doesn't distract you from what the point of focus is as much.
I name it creamy. It's
yeah.
Creamy, yeah.
I think the next one even shows that element of it better.
Yeah.
So that's the close-up of this one. And you see how the structure just kind of gets a little bit more softer, all the edges. I mean, obviously it's out of focus, but when we start to see comparisons, it has its own unique thing to it. So
so here is another example. I always have a look at the close by the focus. How does it behave, and how does it look like in the far defocus area and the near defocus area? So and this again, it's a very soft lens. Yes, I would say in the defocus area. Yes.
Yeah, so here you really see those structures in the background. It's a bit hard to tell if they're trees or they're blades of grass or they're plants. They don't have as much information there because it gets kind of just more blurred and more creamy, and it makes that stick that's in focus pop out a little more because your eye's just not drawn to. There's not as much for your eye to be drawn to.
Okay, now the Samilux 50. Much more lens elements are implemented to get higher performance, and to get a nearly breathing-free transform from infinity to minimum object distance. And this is realized by implementing a trend of telecentric. Yes, it tends to be telecentric. It's not totally telecentric, but it's so in that direction optimized that the breathing is minimized. Yes, and we have two A-spheres implemented. We have a rear focusing group here. You can see here. So the f-stop is moving. So the aperture is moving. Is included, and so the breathing could be minimized. Special coatings, of course, special glass materials we implemented.
And an A-sphere within the focusing group. So even though that focusing group is smaller, that A-sphere gives it a lot more power to move the lens in different ways, move the light in different ways.
So let's have a look at the through focus MTF, and here you see the contrast increases to 78% for 40 line pairs. And so here the fall off is faster of the defocus, of the contrast by defocusing, yes. And this is very important, and how does it behave here in this area for the lower frequencies, yes. You need to have a look at it. Mm-hmm. And in here again, it's quite soft here and there. And this is not only design, but this is also realized by the production on a high level, very high level. You need no astigmatism, no coma, and so forth, due to manufacturing failure. So is allowed. So this guarantees you such an through focus behavior. Yes.
Yeah, and when you look at the close-up of this one, you'll see how much faster that transition from out of focus to in focus is, like how steep that curve is really representing it. And even though, as Peter was saying, the out of focus remains creamy, it remains softer and not as distracting, it does pop into focus and out of focus a little bit faster and a little bit more dramatically than the Hugo lens did, for example. Yeah. And you'll also notice that there's no color shift. So there's no green or red in the out of focus elements. And that is, it's not an accident, it's from glass types and the way the lens.
To realize this high contrast, so nearly 80%, you need to optimize the color aberration more than with a Hugo. Yes. And here again the same scenery, and yeah.
Yeah, in many ways, it's a similar scene looking to the Hugo when you're not as dramatic in that in focus and out of focus. That first picture of the forward plate makes it starkly dramatic, but when you're in a scene that has a little bit more softness to it and a little bit more distance for that focus to throw out, it doesn't feel as stark, even though it is still performing in the same way.
But in this...
Could we get a microphone real quick? Sorry.
Just a question. Why is it that the Samilux has more contrast than the Simicrons? As a faster lens, you'd expect it to maybe have less micro contrast. That's
a great question, Peter.
Yeah, because of the many lens elements, we could improve the performance. So spherical aberration is reduced to minimum, and so it's sharp.
Are the coatings the same across the Lux and the Crons in terms of the level of coating? Is it exactly the same?
Do you mean as far as like multi-layer versus single? Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much all of the lenses use multi-layer coatings.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But the types of coatings varies. It varies within a lens from element to element. So
depends on the glass materials.
yeah, there's a whole library of that, because some soft glass you have to coat very delicately, harder glass you can do different coating styles on.
Price tracks with the function of the number of those lens elements too.
And the price tracks with the number of the lens elements.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You see zeros with some of those groups, you just add a zero. Yeah.
So, but what you see here, it's the autofocus elements here are more structured than the Hogo, if you can remember. Yes, a little bit more. Yes. So, the last, the LZ 50mm T-stop 2.1. Even though stop down, it's a lot of effort implemented here to realize a good performance. Yes, the rear focusing group here is bigger. The aperture is implemented here, and yeah, special glasses, the same effort like the other one, but only one A-sphere implemented here.
And if we go back to what, some of the formulas we were looking at in the beginning, the difference between Summilux and LC, as I mentioned, was also the design target of the format.
Yes.
Larger format equals more effort. So designing for a larger format here required that we would still, even though it's a stop slower than the Hugos and the Summiluxes, it still needed a lot of glass to do what we wanted it to do at that larger format. And yes, Hugo and LC are both designed for the same format size. However, they're doing different things. One is adjusting for breathing. You'll see how the MTF curves are different, and that's why two lenses designed same format will be different in the amount of effort that goes into it.
So, and it also tends to be telecentric in this case. Yeah.
Right, which the Hugo lenses, again, were not very telecentric. The LC lenses, that was one of the parameters, to keep more telecentricity, to reduce the breathing characteristic of it.
So, and here you see the contrast behavior through focus, MTF contrast, and now we have nearly 90% contrast for high frequencies. Yes, and the fall off is very important to judge the through focus behavior close to the focus position. Yes.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yes, please.
Yeah, it has higher contrast. This is something we'll see when we look at the pictures now. That higher contrast combined with that slower fall off curve is going to have a big effect on what the images are going to look like and how that relates. Yeah. And especially when you look at the other frequencies. The blue curve, the 40 line pairs, is still relatively steep, but not so much compared to the Hugo and the Summilux especially. But the 20 and the 10s, as you go further out, are much broader, and they change much slower over that distance.
So, and here again, it's clear. Yes, and go closer, no color aberration. Yes, it's not that soft like the 1.4 and 1.5 close to the focus. It can be because the T-stop is different. Yes.
Right.
So the depth of focus is larger.
Yeah, being one T-stop difference, the depth of field is different for part of that reason. But as we go to the next ones, you'll see how the character is not necessarily linear or, following a direct line from that.
Yeah.
So here again, this one has a high amount of detail, but you still feel that sense of depth, even though it's one stop slower than the other lenses.
Yes, the message is it's not only the T-stop defines defocus behavior, it's also the contrast through focus MTF behavior of the lens system defines how the images look like by through focus. Yes. And as higher the contrast, as faster it fall off. Yes. So a T-stop 2.1 doesn't look like a 2.1, it looks more like 1.7 or so, or 1.8. Yes. Depending on the performance. Even though Rainer often said it's too sharp, I don't think so, no.
Yeah, we'll do some side-by-sides where we can really dig into this.
So, yes.
But in this one, if you click to the close-up, you'll see how in the background, the structures of those green elements, the grass and the trees and stuff, start to become a little bit more defined. And that's far enough away that that's not necessarily a function of the T-stop performance as much as it is the characteristic of that out of focus. It just has a bit more structure to it than the other two lenses.
So, and here the through focus behavior of all three lenses are highlighted on one page. So you see that this is a Zumilux, this is a Hugo, and here I think LZ lies in between of that. That's not so far away of that. Yeah. Okay, and now we do a closer comparison, not single images.
Oh, hold on a second, Peter.
Just on the charts on the previous slide.
Oh yeah, sure.
Just a quick question here. Why are the peak of contrast falling at a different point than the zero on the chart?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. So,
I tried to understand that.
How do you define zero? Zero is defined paraxial, and how do you balance your aberration? So, in this case, Hugo's zero is far away, so this means spherical aberration appears, but it's minimized, and so a defocus is more. But what is zero? What is the focal length? It's an abstract value. Nobody can handle a focal length. You can handle the field of view and the image sensor, but you can't handle a focal length. Try to use an optical axis. On paper you can do it, but optical axis doesn't exist, and that's the reason why it depends on the reference. Yes, you can change your reference, and then it's a little different. What you see here, that the focus is minimized. Yes, for example. But thank you. Good,
Yeah,
good question. Thanks.
the most important thing is really that that x-axis is consistent when you're doing comparisons, so that your relative understanding of where those curves fall is consistent in your comparison. Yes, Chris.
I'm just curious about the characteristic of the little hump that occurs. Is that a function of the floating elements engaging or changing at a different rate that you have at the on the blue line? There's a hump at the on the negative values there.
Here, this is a phase step. Phasensprung. Can everybody tell me in translation? This is physics. When you look on a screen projection wall, and you focus a Siemens star, and suddenly you recognize that the order of black and white changes, and this is here such a thing. Yes. So. Simulation of that. Normally it goes in that direction, but we don't have negative contrast. So. Okay, thank you. May I continue? Yes? Okay.
Oh wait, we got one here.
Sorry.
Oh, hold on a sec. One more. This is great, by the way. Love you guys weighing in, so please don't be shy.
On the Hugo lens compared to the Summilux lens, there's less contrast, right?
Yes.
Also, I would say on the Hugo lens, there's also less resolution. Yes.
Yes.
Is it possible to design a lens that there's more resolution but less contrast?
No.
Or do they go together?
Yes.
Good question.
Yeah.
They go together.
It go together, yes. I have no idea how to do that, yes. or you take a filter where the edges of the aperture will be destroyed, yes. Thank you. So let's do a comparison more directly. So here's the Hugo lens, the Summilux lens, and the LC lens. And especially, okay, in focus we know how it works, and when we do the comparison here. So Hugo, the background is I would say best blurred, yes. And here you see more structures. But LZ is not that far away from the Summilux, I think, yeah, in that behavior. Yeah. And the next example, so a little closer. So it was a windy situation. I couldn't, and the sun was going. There were some clouds in the air, so it's a little different here. But
they do represent very closely when you look at this kind of level of specificity and centering on it.
So I don't like to talk about images. So have a look and judge by yourself. It's yeah. And the last one. So
what I think is notable about this one is a couple things. One, Peter took all of these images using the Leica SL2 camera, the Leica SL2 camera, which is a full-frame sensor, 24 by 36 sensor. And remember that the Summilux was not designed for that format. It was designed for Super 35. So when you see the shading and the vignetting that's happening in that middle image, a lot of that has to do with that being outside of the optimal performance zone. But when you do take a narrow strip, it illuminates it and it still gives you information. I mean, people shoot Summilux on Alexa LF at a 2:1 aspect ratio because then your image circle size is shrinking as your aspect comes down. So you're actually using more of what the lens was designed for. That's one thing to note. Hugo and Elsie, both designed for the same format. The Hugo has a good amount of light loss toward the edges, whereas the Elsie has a little bit more of that illumination there.
Yeah, this is due to the telecentric construction, yes. Mm-hmm. Because cosine by 4, you need to have the same angle of view on image and on object side and image side. Yes, yes, please.
Why is the Hugo more it's warmer? It's because of the lenses deviate to a warmer color.
Yes, it's based on the lens design. Yes, and I took JPEGs, so I didn't change it. So, so that's the reason why. But in principle, all images taken with the Hugo lens was a little warmer. Yes.
But to that, I mean, to expand on that a little bit, the color temperature of a lens is determined by
glass materials
and also coatings.
And coatings, yes.
Yeah. So depending on the glass materials you use and the coatings you apply, you can actually change and shift the color temperature to a certain extent. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
So, wrong direction. So, so we just talked about the 3 lenses with different T-stop, with different contrast behavior. And so you see, don't trust only the MTF. Through focus MTF is also important, or judge it by looking at images. That's the best for you, yes. You do not give an interpretation like I do it, so there's no need for that. But there are differences in design, and this you can see in the drawings I showed you, in the through focus behavior, and that's it, yes. And so even though it's T2.1, it looks more than a 1.8, yes, because of the contrast behavior, I think this lens.
Yeah, if you push the contrast up, then you can, and you separate from the background more. It gives the appearance of more depth, of more separation. So a low contrast lens that was, like a T2.5 or something, wouldn't be able to achieve the same separation as a high contrast lens that was a T2.5. Yes, we've got a question.
So within like a set of lenses with different focal lengths, do you try to have like a similar MTF curve, or you say like this focal length that might be used more for close-ups, so you want a different kind of MTF curve?
So for a set, the design targets are always the same, so the slow focus behavior should be the same for all the lens elements, lens systems, sorry. Yes. Yep. So this behavior is defined at the beginning. The general constraints and then the design constraints need to be defined at the beginning for all the lens systems we do, yes.
But it does take more effort to make those kind of things match, to make color temperature match and to make MTF performance match across a set of 8, 10, 12 lenses means that, once again, going back to our earlier points, the constraints on the lens designer become more and more and more. So it is much easier to make lenses that are not as easily matched. You don't have to adhere to that. You may not have to use the exotic glass types to achieve certain things because each focal length has its own challenges. On the wide side and the telephoto side, the challenges become a little bit more extreme, and that's why lenses tend to get bigger. You have to get a certain size to achieve certain targets. So yeah, all of these things add into that, and when in photography, it's not as common to have matched lenses. That's why some of the vintage optics, people are buying a few sets and they're picking the ones that look the best because that wasn't as big of a deal at the time. Now, modern photo optics, it's much more prevalent, and in cinematography, it's crucial. Oh, 2 questions. Let's go up top first.
Hello. Just wonder if for the skin tone is also part of a big considerations of how the lens is rendering. So in what aspect of optic design that determine a lot of how do you go with the skin tone?
It's a great question.
So skin tone is mostly defined by the transmission behavior of the lens. Yes.
The MTF transmission?
No, the transmission of the light, of the colors, yes, the wavelengths, yes. So, and we can take care of that, yes, by choosing the right glass materials with the right transmission and choosing the right coatings, yes.
Do you want a higher transmission or lower? Is there how does that pull as far as skin tone?
So we define it by CCI. I don't know how it's done in cinematography.
It's a lighting.
Yeah, CCI, it's color contribution index. Mm-hmm. So 3 values where you can see which color rendition do you have. Yes.
Let's go to.
On that question.
Oh, sure. Yeah, hold on.
I can say that there's another company that talks about their look in terms of the photography of the quality of their lenses, that they purposely slightly defocus the red wavelengths for the skin tone to have a little creamier quality. So they're tuning that wavelength, which is primarily a contributor to skin tone, specifically for that as part of their quote unquote look.
Yeah, and the red, as you point out, is super important for that, and that's why cooler versus warmer lenses on that spectrum will represent skin tones so much differently. James?
I was going to ask, actually, there's a factor that applies to cinematography that doesn't apply to the photo industry, which is weight and the comparative weight of all the lenses. Leica's got a very good reputation for having equal weight across all of the set of lenses. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges of matching weights across all the focal lengths?
In the cinematography world or
in terms
photography?
of Steadicam balance and things like that.
Yeah, so yeah, matching weights and even going beyond that to where the floating element or the moving elements of a lens are, because anytime you shift elements inside a lens, you shift balance. Ask any Steadicam operator with a zoom. You want that weight to stay as consistent as possible. It's another factor of that, to be honest. And when you get to those extremes, like if we had the design for a 16 millimeter Summilux up here, physically the exact same size as the 50 millimeter. And if you thought that was complex, you should see some of the glass types inside of that one because they're doing so much more work to keep that lens at a smaller size.
Is that a bigger challenge with the Hugos because they are substantially smaller?
So is it a bigger challenge with the Hugos was the question. It's easier, to be honest. I mean, because the fact of the matter is, with the Hugos, we have this very small optical design, and they're only as big as they are because of the mechanical requirements. If you want to shoot with an M lens with 90-degree focus turn, you can keep it super compact. But on a film set, you want at least 270 degrees of focus rotation, and that comes with a lot of mechanics that have to be built into that. Not to mention a larger mount for it and all this weight. It gives you, when you're going that way and you're putting on weight, it's much easier to match because you have more control about how much mass goes into the lens instead of trying to take it out of the lens. Oh, we got one up there. Oh, do we have a microphone?
I've got one over here.
Oh, where'd you go? Raise your hand.
I'm top up here.
Oh, hey there.
Hey. So listen, at the risk of I'm not a cinematographer, so at the risk of asking questions that everyone already knows, you talk about breathing. When I think about breathing, I think about a zoom lens, and I don't think about breathing on a prime. So what do you mean by breathing? You also use the term telecentric, and I don't know quite what you were talking about that. Final question is a little more technical, which is some of these lens designs seem to have more elements in the focus part. And what does that do to the lens? What does that do to the quality of the final image?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So, so when you have two groups in an optical system which moves differently, or you have a rear focusing system, in principle, the first group need to be optimized by itself, and the second group need to be optimized so that the movement doesn't affect the aberration. And as better each group need to be optimized, as more effort you have to put in each group. Yes. So normally you can build a lens in total and can balance all the aberrations between the lens elements in total. But when you do focusing, internal focusing, you have to optimize each group by its, in terms of aberration, intrinsic aberrations. And then as better you want to have it for variation, for constant behavior by focusing, as more effort you have to put into, yes.
And to answer the first part about breathing and telecentricity, we can show you at our stand because we have some Hugos there and we can exhibit how that looks. But basically, imagine you have two C-stands on the edge of your frame, right? So they're in frame. Now you rack focus from infinity to close focus. Those C-stands are either going to move out of frame completely or they're going to move further into the frame, and what you see is going to expand. So it's really present when you see things that have vertical or horizontal straight edges. It can be you can hide it with a camera movement. A lot of people that have lenses that do that, they'll hide that with a camera movement, either a pan or a push or something. But that's a factor. That's what that factor is changing your focal length, basically. It's still like taking a zoom lens and just twisting the zoom a little bit, but you're a prime. To your question about telecentricity, imagine that on a digital sensor, for example, each pixel is actually a bucket. It's a rectangular bucket, and light comes into it. And so when you have, at the very edge, you have light rays that are coming at an angle, they're not getting into that bucket as much. That's not what breathing does, but this is kind of the idea of telecentricity. If you can make the light more like this, you're getting more directly into it. So telecentric is basically perpendicular to the film plane, when you're coming like this instead of at an angle. On film, telecentricity wasn't as big a deal for illumination as it is in digital, but it still had an impact on the breathing characteristics, because as you're moving light away, your angle is narrowing. So yeah, right there.
Yeah, I think I got the mic. So I'm still trying to wrap my head a little bit around just the physics of sharpness, of contrast, and focus. And so I have two questions. First one, I guess, just with older vintage lenses, generally at wide open, the image tends to be less sharp, less contrasty. So I guess, could you explain a little more about why that is? And then second question, just asking for a friend. How do you guys come up with the names of these lenses?
I'll let you do the first question and then I'll answer the second one.
So the vintage lenses are not designed for that high contrast because at that time we did not have all the technologies we have today. So not so many A-sphere we could implement, or no A-sphere, and so the contrast and the size was limited, and we couldn't improve the contrast with the limited lens elements, yes. So that's the reason why. And there was no need to realize such high contrast lenses because the film resolution was not on that level, yes. So we always try to design our systems to the receiver, need to fit to the receiver. And at that time, the film was not on that level, yes. Okay.
And to your second question about the names, Summilux is an old Leica term that basically means anything from f1.4 to 1.8.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the aperture speed, the f-stop speed. Then Summicron follows that. Then there's a whole lexicon of names for speed. So our first set was a T1.4. We used the Summilux name, and that's why it's called Summilux-C. Because an M lens is called a Summilux-M, an R lens is called a Summilux-R. So, but once we had used the name, we couldn't go back to it. So we had to come up with other names. And Hugo and Elsie both come from the history of Leica as a company. Hugo is named after a man named Hugo Verhoeven, who invented what is now the Leica M mount, the bayonet mount. Prior to that, there was a screw mount that all Leica lenses used. And in the early 60s, he developed...
54.
54, thank you. Yeah, right, October 27th. He developed it, and then his name's on the patent, as is, it's a Leica patent, but he was the designer and developer of that. So that M system, which we consider to be kind of the iconic heart of Leica as a company, exists now partially because of Hugo Verhoeven. And so because the Hugo lenses use the M optics, we wanted to honor him by naming them after him. Elsie is the daughter of Ernst Leitz II, and her name was Elsie Kuhn-Leitz. And she never worked for the company, but she was a fantastic human who did a lot of very important humanitarian work, especially during World War II. She helped her father move German families out of Germany before the borders closed. They would send them to other Leica businesses around the world, just to get them out. Jewish families, what did I say? German, yeah. Well, they were German, but they were also Jewish. More importantly, they were the Jewish families to leave Germany. And then once the border closed, she was arrested for helping, I believe, Polish people that had been imprisoned and were working in the factories, sneaking them food and blankets. She also got caught helping a Jewish woman escape to Switzerland. And after the war, she was very important in the reunification of relationships with France. Anyway, an amazing human being whose story really should be told more, and so we honored her with that name.
So you laugh that I highlighted 1954, but next year we will celebrate 70 years M bayonet. So show me a company who has so long time the same bayonet. And this is a heritage, but it's also a challenge for us to realize better lens systems even with the same bayonet. Yes. So, and that's the reason why it's important for me. 56, yes, 54. Sorry, 54.
All right. Yes, with the microphone there.
Could I just follow to the question on the telecentricity? So if I get it right. If there's like the perfect lens, the light would fall at like straight 90-degree angle.
Right.
So does the flange mount and this size, like the diameter of the mount itself, does it influence like the how technically great the lens could be? What I mean by that is like there's, for example, when I see at the Sony mount and the Sony sensor, there's not much space between the corner of the sensor itself and like the outer ring of the mount.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you weigh in on the more complicated part of that, but definitely, if you took a PL mount lens and a smartphone sensor, you would be telecentric. And that's a bit extreme, but when digital sensor sizes started to encroach on the amount of the PL lens diameter, it was really hard for designers to try and hit these bigger corners in a telecentric way. And that's one of the reasons that Arri has gone with an LPL mount, which has a wider throat on it. It's a reason that a lot of the cameras companies that have mirrorless, like Leica, Sony, Canon, everybody, have these larger diameters on the mounts. But as far as the closeness to the actual sensor plane, does that have any impact on it?
As closer as better, yes.
Closer is better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, we got one here, and then, can we get the microphone for him down here? Thank you for your patience.
I have one question. Let's imagine if I would shoot a film and I would shoot it on a digital camera, also a digital motion picture camera, and a film motion picture camera running film through it. In what way, what would I have to expect as probably problems that arise for the digital motion picture camera because of the different sensor blocks and the design of the sensor blocks, and for the film camera because it's running film? What would I need to take care about?
I mean, the biggest thing to be concerned about is that the lens you put on is not going to impact the spinning mirror of a film camera and destroy that.
Of course. But thinking about the color behavior, because there's, I mean, the lens is the lens, but then the whole system is actually using different receptors. Does it change the colors in any way, or the focus or the contrast?
I think the colors is more a function probably of the recording medium. So there's a lot of great cinematographers here shooting on film that will tell you how that can impact the look of things.
I was rather thinking about the depth of sensor packs. They vary from 2 millimeters to 4 millimeters.
Oh, you mean like the OLPF stack on top of the sensor?
Plus that.
Okay.
Does it change anything? Or can I use a filter, a lens set from LEITZ throughout the systems in one film production?
There are differences, yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yes, and today the lenses are designed to cover this filter packaging in front of the system, yes. So, and if you take it away, it's missing, yes.
Yeah. And
but it's how much it is in cinematography, how much how much it affects, I don't know. I know in theory, but not in practice.
Yeah, so I probably wouldn't realize it visually.
Yeah,
you want to say.
So telecentricity helps to cover this range of filters in front of the sensor. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about it from a value perspective, you know, the Leica R series, a lot of people use those for moving images. It was designed for a DSLR format, which had, you know, even more things going on inside of it that, you know, the lens was never designed for a digital sensor, and especially one with all of that. But people love the look of it. So I wouldn't consider it a problem. I would consider it what characteristic are you going to get from it, and testing all of these is going to show you those different characteristics.
Thank you.
Right here, actually.
All right. Can I, while you get a mic that way, can I just ask?
Yes. But he's been so patient, so we'll definitely get you next.
So, how do you guys sit down and say, okay, we're going to make a new lens. We want the flare to do this. We want the contrast to be like this. We want the, you know, everything, all the dreams and hopes you want a lens to be. And then how do you as engineers be like, you guys are crazy, I'm not doing that. And how far do you go into the experimentation before you say, this is impossible to do, or let's keep going with this? Or
no. So first of all, the customer's requirements are very important. And we need to understand which technology do we need to realize that, yes. And that's the reason why we implemented glass materials and so forth. And we always have a look at the new technologies appear in the market and how can we implement this into our products, yes. So customers' requirements are most important. The second issue is that we have more than 100 years experience in designing lenses, and we see the trends, and we see in which, if we want to do the next step, what do we need? So, and there are always some evolutions in technology, and we try to implement it. Yes, and we like the problems
raised at the beginning. We do not know the solution at the beginning, but this is engineering. Yes, if you have the answer before you finish, it's boring. Yes, it's only standard working. So you want to be challenged by the product manager to realize new systems. Yes.
For the motion picture world, you know, as Peter was saying, it starts with feedback from the community, and you know. For us, we've seen how the evolution of the desire and the taste of cinematographers has evolved over the last 10 years, and that's why all of the things we're coming out with have different looks and feels to them, because as those tastes evolve, we look for different ways to meet those tastes. You can take extreme routes to do that, you can take more general routes to do that, and our goal as a company is to try to find many ways to meet as many needs as possible with that.
Thank you.
So as a designer, I'm more interested in new systems than in vintage systems. Yes, of course.
So I have a question about anamorphics, and I know you guys don't make anamorphics. Can I ask it, or?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Speak up just a little bit.
Oh, sure. So when shooting anamorphic, often you'll see the focus fall off in the top and bottom. And I was talking with an optical engineer who was saying that they're able to adjust that somehow so that the focus point would not necessarily be in the center, but maybe where the eyes would land on like a typical framing. So first question, what causes that fall off in the top and bottom with anamorphic, and how would you go about adjusting the lens to do that?
I'm not sure whether I got the question right, but I show the fall off on axis. You also can show it the same for off axis, and so it depends where you want to focus. Yes, it doesn't matter. So it's similar on axis and off axis. Yes.
You're saying you could move, like most lenses are meant to focus to the center, but if you just change.
Yeah, but we design a lens so that there's a focus plane. Yes, and not only a focus point, and that the rest is curved. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we have a plane surface which we can image in total, sharp. Yes.
I'm going to ask an audience member to also weigh in on that one.
I was going to say field curvature. You have two planes of field curvature in the anamorphic system, and maybe the top.
Okay.
So I'm going to repeat it real quick. What he was saying was that with the anamorphic, you have two different planes of field curvature, and so if you adjust one, you can move, horizontally, or you can move it vertically as well. You can optimize for top or bottom.
The soft top and bottom is also not universal to all anamorphics. It's emblematic of certain manufacturers and the anamorphic focusing solutions that they're having as part of their prescription of how they're creating the anamorphosis. So you see that in, for example, like Hawks, you'll see the top and bottom, but you may not see that, for example, certainly not in Scorpios, for example. It's a completely different method, or master anamorphics go about it in a different way. They start distributing the cylindrical elements and even aspheres and even toroidal elements inside the optical design. So you can affect it on the optical design aspects. So not all anamorphics are the same. So it's not a blanket statement that they all are soft on the top and bottom. Certainly, yeah, and in certain anamorphic solutions, you'll see that phenomenon. Certainly in like Hawk and older like Lomo, similar focusing solutions in there.
How would you go about adjusting that positioning of the fall?
So the question is, how would you go about adjusting that through moving stuff around in the lens? I mean, there's no like one answer to that, because to Chris's point, each system would be a different way of addressing that. Each one of those lenses that has a different construction and optical design will need to be approached in a unique way to address field curvature and where that falls.
Yeah, the cylinder could be fronted and back. That's going to change it altogether.
Yep.
Flat anamorphic, rear anamorphic, mid-engine anamorphic. All variables.
I have a question about the flares. Is there something that you also consider when you design, or is it just a side effect? Because so many cinematographers love flares, the other hates. Is there something that you also?
So to introduce flare is not a problem. So to reduce it to a minimum is always a challenge, yes, because it's not only optics, it's mechanics. There are many communication between all these surfaces, and you have to control this, yes. And so if somebody is asking for more flare, we can do it, yes.
But there are kinds also, yeah? There are some cinematographers love this kind of flares and they hate the other kinds.
So I'm from the photographic part, and I have no idea to that, so sorry.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, you do make that choice along the way. You know, the Summoluxes were designed to be super resistant to flare. You can shoot candles without ghosting and really hold that. The LC lenses are designed to flare much more. And that's glass types and coatings, and all of those things kind of go into that. But for us, on the cinema side, it is a big part of the conversation when we're putting those constraints together in the beginning. Yep. You and then...
One more concerning how they perform against the light in the very bright conditions. That's also something that you consider when you design it?
Yes, yes. It's part of simulation to get rid of ghost and flare. And sometimes you need to change your optical design because there are some communication between lens elements that increases so much the flare that you need to change your design, yes. So there are so many aspects we have to take into account during designing. So half of the time it's optimizing a system, the other half of the time is to make it feasible for the production and to get rid of all these issues, yes. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for doing this seminar. It may be a silly question, but is it a truth that the magic sauce of Leica is the density of your glass?
Density?
Yeah, that it's more denser glass that separates you from other
So we have a lot of experience by using exotic glass materials, yes, but so everybody is able to use this glass today. So I think our treasure is the long history we have, and with this knowledge of designing lenses and producing lenses, I can say that is Leica, yeah. But it's not only glass. There are many components you have to take into account, and so that's it. Yes. So believe me, 150 years, yes, so more optical design, but 100 years photographic lenses design. So we can build every vintage lens we want because we have all the design data. We know how to do it, but we are more interested in new lenses.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Hello. Just before I ask my first question, is the presentation actually over? Because we seem to have gone straight into questions. Did you finish it?
If we can summarize what we talked about, then we can go into the discussion we already do. So
we got real close.
So
we're like right there at the end. I wasn't pressing it because it's
there are many factors that go into designing a lens system. I already explained, hopefully. Some factors are physical and based on available technologies. Others are determined by constraints like format, F number, especially light flex. I hope you will not forget. This is a toolbox the optical designer can use to create special character or look. Knowledge is the key to use this toolbox to create optics required by the cinematographer. And we have a long experience in doing so, yes. And normally the magicians don't reveal these tricks, but we already talked about that. So, thanks a lot.
Yeah, so that's the conclusion of the formal part. Yeah. But we do have the room for 12 more minutes, so happy to continue the conversation.
If I can ask my question now.
No.
So you spoke a lot about glass materials and coatings, sweeping statement. Do all lens manufacturers use the same sort of glass materials, or do you guys have your own sort of like KFC spice mix where you don't tell each other and you've got certain coatings for certain lenses inside, but that's like a trade secret?
I didn't understand right.
So the question is basically, do we have any proprietary glass? Do we have proprietary combinations that make up the trade secret?
Yes.
And I think the follow-up was, what are they, right?
No. It takes 2 or more hours to talk about that.
And then if you, say, go and join another lens company, are you not allowed to speak about those at all? Do you have to like sign an NDA?
So we do not hide everything, but you can find it in the patents we filed. So.
And some of that secret sauce is also technique. You know, Leica polishes a lot of the A spheres that they use as well as the ones we use, and there are machines developed for that. Some things tools developed in-house that are proprietary or custom for measurement or shaping or things like that. Everybody does it, but not everybody does it exactly the same way.
I think it's a combination of designing and cooperate with the manufacturer, with our in-house manufacturing, and doing tolerancing, implementing simultaneous engineering to be sure that the production will be feasible, and all these things we have to take into account. Yes, designing a lens only by that what you learn, it's cool. It's only half of it. Yes.
Yeah, my question was that I didn't really understand how the sensor size affects the depth of field, because you said that with the large format sensor, like T1 acted like T1.8. Why is that, and like how does it work exactly?
So that part, we were talking about when we were looking at the graphic, like the images, the photos that were taken.
Yes.
That wasn't as much about the format, because all of those were captured on the exact same sensor size. That performance, looking like it had more separation like a faster lens, was a function of the high contrast, and then mostly the high contrast, and then the character of how the out of focus elements look.
But does the design for the format of the lens affect the depth of field? Like a lens designed for a large format, does it like the depth of field is different than one designed for the Super 35?
So when you take the different lenses on the same format, yes, and you have a large lens, 50 millimeter with f2, and a lens which is designed for the 35 millimeter format, yes, then it looks the same. But when you take this 50 millimeter for the large format, which is in terms of angle of view equivalent to a 35 millimeter format, 35 millimeter focal length, yes, then you have a different light flux, and then the depth of focus becomes smaller.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a relative thing. The lens itself doesn't change, it's just how it looks relative on different sensors.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to ask about a thing that wasn't mentioned, but I'm very curious about it, and that's the apochromatic elements. Because I really tend to like the look of apochromatic lenses, but these are not very popular in cinema world, more in photographic, and it's pretty much always just one lens per line and not the whole suite of apochromatic lenses. So that's one question, and the other is, what is the difference between Leica and LEITZ? Because I'm very confused about that.
Okay, I answer the first question and he will answer the second question. So apochromatic lenses we have in our M system, for example, 4 lens types, yes, 90, 50, 75 and 35. And in our SL line we have 6 lens systems. And thank you for the question. I didn't mention apochromatic correction here because the Sumilux and the LZ lens are in principle apochromatic corrected lenses. Yes, no color in the image, and this
causes apochromatic correction. And for this, you need special glass materials, are already explained, extra low dispersion, anomal dispersion, and so forth. But to talk about apochromatic correction in general, I have a presentation takes around 1 hour to talk about that. Yes. So, yes, as better the contrast need to be, as more color correction you have to implement, and this leads to apochromatic correction at the end. Yes.
And to answer your question about the difference between Leica and LEITZ, Leica as a company has existed since the mid-1800s. In the mid-2000s, the owner of Leica decided he wanted to get into the cinema lens business. But rather than developing that inside of Leica proper, he started a standalone company, basically related to Leica. And in fact, many of the early employees were handpicked from Leica staff that were either in manufacturing or design. We're on the same corporate campus, we're in the same family of companies, and we work really closely together in design and supply relationships. But on paper, it's 2 separate companies.
Thanks.
Yep.
And LEITZ is a family name, the original family name of the owner. And Leica is LEITZ camera. LEITZ, L-E-I from lights, and C-A from camera, Leica.
Yeah. In fact, the company name was Ernst Leitz Wetzlar until the 80s, when the big company was sold into 3 pieces, which became Leica Camera, Leica Geosystems, and Leica Microsystems. So prior to the 80s, every lens is engraved Ernst Leitz Wetzlar, because that's the company name, but the product name was Leica Camera until it became the company name. So when we did the cinema business, we kind of took on the original family name, the original company name, which had been kind of not in use anymore. Please.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask you, Peter, if we've talked shortly about anamorphic lenses. Is it like a desirable thing to design such lenses, or is it like a challenge you don't like to take on because it's like a
I'm not so familiar with anamorphic lenses.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I can say it's something that we've talked about for many years. Sometime in the future it will probably happen, but for the time being, over the last 10 years, we've had so many format changes and so much disruption in the camera side of things. As a company that would start out in anamorphic, it wasn't always clear what that design target should be. We asked a lot of cinematographers, should it be full frame or Super 35? 2 squeeze, 1.8, 1.7. And during this whole fluctuation, as things are starting to settle down, it's something we can start looking at again. But in the interim, we decided we would focus on our spherical and prime and zoom business.
Thanks.
Yep. I think we have time for one more. Anybody have one more question? Oh, can we get a mic over here?
You mentioned in the resolution tests you use sinusoidal black and white patterns. I'm curious why that instead of hard-edged.
Say why that's a hard edge?
Why that instead of a hard-edged black and white pattern?
So in a hard edge, every frequency is implemented. And it's not so easy to focus on a certain frequency. When you look at a hard edge, you always look at 80 line pairs or 100 line pairs. So today, if you have a high resolution lens, it's okay. But the Hugo lens, you shouldn't focus on 80 line pairs. So the focus should be on 40 or 20 line pairs. And that's so if you know the Siemens star test, it's a sinusoidal character of the Siemens star. So it's not a hard-edged star test. But normally in projection tests you use, how is it called? These bars, yes, in certain resolution. But when you go close and focus, you look at high frequencies. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming.